I would give talks all over the place, and found it kind of frustrating that they do not understand the extent to which the United States has a debt to India, which is not even known. And of course, being very fond, an avid reader of Sri Aurobindo, particularly the book The Life Divine, which transformed me quite a bit. It was one of those books that shake you up, and your whole worldview changes if you really go deep into it. And I recommend it very heavily for anybody who wants to read it. So this took me to Pondicherry and Auroville quite a few times, and that is when I discovered that right here, Sri Aurobindo's work was also being digested by a very eminent scholar in the West called Ken Wilber.
The book which is at the heart of our event today, The Battle for Consciousness Theory, it is a work in which we authors have meticulously documented and challenged the digestion and subversion of the work, one of India's greatest sages, Sri Aurobindo.
And given that Rajiv ji spoke about his U-turn theory, and given that he is the creator of the U-turn theory, he would not talk about how important that theory is, but I would like to shed light on this because it sort of validates and underlines the genius of Rajiv ji in figuring out the U-turn theory.
Good evening, Namaskar. On behalf of Chairman of Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTACH, Major General L.K. Gupta, Member Secretary INTACH, Dr. C.T. Misra, and the entire INTACH family, it is my pleasure to welcome the chief guest for the evening, Dr. Karan Singh ji, the guest of honor, Professor Kapil Kapur ji, authors Shri Rajiv Malhotra ji, Manogna Sastri and Kundan Singh, Dr. Shruti Nada Poddar, and all the respected members of the audience to today's book launch and discussion of The Battle for Consciousness Theory, a response to Ken Wilber's appropriation of Sri Aurobindo and other Indian thought. Before we proceed further, I want to give a brief introduction about INTACH and the scope of our work to enunciate our engagement with and the support of the book to be released today. INTACH was conceived as an organization with a mandate to conserve and preserve India's tangible and intangible heritage based on the spirit of volunteerism. It has over the years established benchmarks for broadening the scope and bandwidth of heritage and pioneered an integrated and inclusive approach to its conservation. It has continued to evolve into a people's movement with a wide reach representing all parts of the country and has tried to instill the belief that every Indian is a natural custodian of their unique heritage. Given its vast and diverse body of work, INTACH is today considered a major think tank, influencer at the policy, advocacy, and grassroots level through its many interventions. It is a national level body with more than 230 chapters spread across the country dedicated to conservation. INTACH also recognizes that at the forefront of all its conservation agenda is building awareness about the country's heritage and its many related issues. Thus, today's book launch is a collaboration based on similar work philosophy. Infinity Foundation's new book, which will be released today, is a mammoth work of both heritage awareness and heritage preservation, as you will discover when the book is unveiled in introductions and later on in discussion. I won't like to give away anything else at this point. And now, may I request our guest of honor, Professor Kapil Kapurji, authors, Rajiv ji is already on stage, Manogna Sastri, Professor Kundan Singh, Shruti is not here, to please come up on stage. And may I request Member Secretary INTACH, Dr. C.T. Misra, to kindly accompany them. There's a chair waiting there in the third row. Dr. Karan Singh ji, I can proudly say, is one of the founder members of INTACH. He received his PhD from the University of Delhi on the political thought of Sri Aurobindo and joined the Union Cabinet in 1967 at the age of 36, thereby becoming the youngest cabinet member. He's a 4-time member of the Rajya Sabha and was appointed the Indian ambassador to the United States in 1989, in addition to being India's member on the UNESCO governing board. He chaired the Orwell Foundation for 20 years and is recognized as an outstanding thinker in India and abroad, and has authored 20 books on a range of subjects. He was awarded the Padma Vibhushan in 2005. Professor Kapil Kapurji is a distinguished scholar, a professor of English, Center for Linguistics and English. He was designated as concurrent professor, Special Center for Sanskrit Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, in the year 2000, and the only concurrent professor at JNU. He has guided 42 PhDs and 30 MPhils. Professor Kapur is editor-in-chief of the 11-volume Encyclopedia of Hinduism, published in January 2012, chief editor of the Encyclopedia of Indian Poetics, which is a UNESCO project currently under publication. He is the visiting professor at the Irish Academy of Cultural Heritage, University of Ulster, UK, nominated member Advisory Board of India Studies, Trinity College, University of Dublin, member Governing Body, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, nominated member Indian Council of Philosophical Research, member of the Monitoring and Planning Committee of Central University of Higher Tibetan Studies, Sarnath. He was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2023. Rajiv ji. For those who don't know him, he is a best-selling author of 14 major, critically acclaimed, path-breaking books, known for challenging the established wisdom in fields as diverse and inspiring as civilizations, cross-cultural encounters, consciousness, and artificial intelligence, he combines his life journey as a technocrat, an entrepreneur, and spiritual explorer, formulating new frameworks and paradigms to bring ancient knowledge into the present context. His writings impact intellectuals worldwide and provoke our comfort zones. Over the past half century, his work has straddled across the USA and India, and he's equally at home in both places. He heads the Princeton-based Infinity Foundation. Manogna Sastri is a MSc from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics with a strong background in theoretical physics and mathematics. She is currently team leader research at Infinity Foundation India. Her research spans astrophysics, Indology focused on chronology and desacralization, civilizational studies, consciousness studies focused on Sri Aurobindo, sustainability and education. She brings scientific rigor to analysis of civilizational studies and rethinking of historical constructs from non-dominant viewpoints. Her work has been published in several peer-reviewed journals and presented at conferences. Kundan Singh, PhD, is a professor at Sophia University, president of the Cultural Integration Fellowship and senior fellow at Hindupedia and Infinity Foundation, author of The Evolution of Integral Yoga, Sri Aurobindo, Sri Ramakrishna, and Swami Vivekanand, and Colonial Discourse, and the Suffering of Indian American Children. A francophone post-colonial analysis, he has published extensively in academia. His recent publications include There Isn't Only Cultural Blindness in Psychology, Colonization and Indian Psychology, A Reciprocal Relationship from the Perspective of Indian Post-Colonial Theory, Decolonizing India Studies. Dr. Shruti Poddar is not here, but our favorite part of her introduction is that she's convener of INTACH at the Shekhawati chapter, a member of the INTACH Governing Council, and a pioneer of NIDA Vibrionics. She also founded the Shruti Foundation in 2007, which is a research and charitable foundation for promoting education, wellness, and healthcare, value-based leadership, and advocacy with a special focus on indigenous knowledge systems and science. I have given out her introduction so that whenever she comes, she can take her place on stage. May I now ask for the book, The Battle for Consciousness Theory, a response to Ken Wilber's appropriation of Sri Aurobindo and other Indian thought, to be formally released by the eminent guests on stage. Thank you. It is now time for the book to be introduced to the audience. And Rajiv ji is signing the book. You have to introduce the book, Rajiv ji.
Thank you. Thank you, Manisha and INTACH, for organizing this. I want to make a special thanks to Dr. Karan Singh, who's a fellow traveler, dear friend, mentor, source of inspiration for so many years. I've had the pleasure of knowing him. Dr. Kapil Kapurji, another elder and mentor of mine. We have missed this year's Imperial Hotel dinner we always have. He calls me and says, "You are in Delhi, I know." So we have to do it. Shruti, of course, is not here. INTACH's entire board and leadership. I had the pleasure to go and walk down next door and see what they do. And they're preserving intangible culture, which is the oral tradition, which includes the kind of works we're doing. In a sense, we're preserving it also. This is part of the intangible culture. I want to thank Blue One Ink, the publisher, and most of all, Sanjana, who is our wonderful editor, who does all the fine nitty-gritty to make sure that the mistakes, which we have plenty of, are taken care of. So I want to tell you the story behind the story, why we did this at all. So this has been a part of my life for a quarter century, this book. This book project has been a part, I started this in the 1990s. The reason I started it is that I was developing something called the U-turn theory and the theory of digestion. I actually left my for-profit life, took a sannyas from profit to do this full-time. And since then, I've been, for 30 plus years, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary as a foundation in 2025. What moved me was, having lived in the West for so long and been very observant, connecting the dots and seeing things, I found a large part of Indian culture hidden beneath the surface of what they thought was their culture. Many, many things, whether it's mathematics, whether it's astronomy, whether it's botany, whether it's linguistics, all sorts of things, not just the obvious ones like yoga and so on, but many things over time. And medicine, of course, spirituality, metallurgy, etc., etc. And I saw evidence of this in the United States. At the top of the post office headquarters in Washington, it says that this is where the post was delivered, the packages were delivered from here, all the treasures and wealth that was brought from the East Indies, which referred to India. So you wonder why they're saying this and what is this packages that were delivered, ships that were delivered. You go across America and you'll find the India referred to right from the time of Christopher Columbus sailing to find a route to India. So often I would ask people, what was Columbus, why was he here in the first place? And they don't have that history. They don't have the history that the origins of America have to do with India. And why was he looking for India is also a whole story. So anyway, I would give talks all over the place, and found it kind of frustrating that they do not understand the extent to which the United States has a debt to India, which is not even known. So I started developing a theory called U-turn theory, because I discovered a whole lot of people would come to India and go through 4 or 5 stages, which I call the U-turn. First stage, they would have a guru. This is like in the 60s, there were a lot of hippies. They would have a guru, and then they would get a Hindu name. They would get initiated, and they would go through a stage of authentic or apparently authentic practice of our tradition. And then some of them would move on to the second stage, where they would say, well, I also find this in Plato, and you can find this in Jesus Christ. You can find the same thing in, such and such scholar, Hegel, whatnot. So they try to make it universal, that this is found everywhere. And I call that sort of decontextualizing the Indian knowledge and claiming it as something universal that they have discovered. And then some would go to stage 3 and say, this is of Western origin, and look for a location, look for a site, look for a scholar or a particular point in history, which they could say is the origin of this thing, and completely eliminate the Indian origins. And then some would go to stage 4, where they would actually start accusing, blaming the Indian sources as being caste-ridden, full of burning women and wives, backward, dirty, irrational, and so on and so forth, that all that negative stereotype would be thrown out at the source of the same tradition from which they got all this wealth. And then lo and behold, this made in USA, made in the West, new knowledge would be exported back to India. So Indians lap it up thinking, wow, ye to American cheese aayi hai, this is very interesting. So I found a lot of examples of this. I found examples of eminent people doing this, and some doing it very innocently. Not that necessarily they are bad people, but they are sort of used to contextualizing in their way. So when you see knowledge, you want to contextualize it in a way that's familiar to you. And it's not some kind of a conspiracy theory or a criticism of anybody's personhood. Probably I would do that. If I go to some place and I would find something, I would see how to refer to it in my own terms, in terms of my own culture. That's quite natural. So this U-turn theory, along with it, is a digestion theory, which is how the knowledge gets digested into a new framework, and the new host incorporates it as part of its own history, part of its own philosophy, and so on. So I started many projects, botany, the digestion of botany, which is very big story, astronomy, huge amount, linguistics. In the 1800s, the study of Panini was a very required thing in departments all over Germany, England, France, and it had a lot of influence on the development of grammars in the European languages. So you can see examples all over the place. And I saw modern examples of Ayurveda and basmati rice and all of that being patented in sort of an American framework, and in fact denying the Indian farmers the right to to their own tradition. So this is what this whole thing is about. In doing so, I was going around looking for allies, for friends, and of course, being very fond, an avid reader of Sri Aurobindo, particularly the book *The Life Divine*, which transformed me quite a bit. It was one of those books that shake you up, and your whole worldview changes if you really go deep into it. And I recommend it very heavily for anybody who wants to read it. So this took me to Pondicherry and Auroville quite a few times. And that is when I discovered that right here, Sri Aurobindo's work was also being digested by a very eminent scholar in the West called Ken Wilber. And Ken Wilber is, by the way, a brilliant man. And there's nothing wrong in what he's doing from his point of view. It is fair for a person to reinterpret something, absolutely fair, and equally fair for me to kind of evaluate it and do a comparative study, which is all I'm doing. There is no accusation, there's no allegation. It's natural for him to study the great ideas and to appropriate what he wants, reject what he doesn't like, adapt them, twist them. We call it distortion, but whatever he does at free thinking, we're not denying his right to free thinking. So this Wilber had become a bit of a hero in Pondicherry in the eyes of several people. So much so that when Infinity Foundation started one of the movements we started was called Indian psychology. We wanted to reinterpret the yoga movement, the meditation movement, or what the Westerners call cognitive sciences, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, which is a lot of it is based on Buddhism. So a lot of Kashmir Shaivism influences have entered, clinical psychology and metaphysics. So I wanted to create a whole lot of conferences we did in the topic of Indian psychology. So when we were doing a conference in Pondicherry, we called that conference Integral Psychology. And we got a notice from Ken Wilber that he had already copyrighted the term. And so we should not use it. And to my surprise, a lot of people in Pondicherry and Auroville said, we should follow along. He's made a nice offer that he's created this Integral Institute in the US and invited any organization to join, become an affiliate. And I read the terms of the agreement. The terms of the agreement was that if our organization, any organization wants to become a member, we surrender our entire intellectual property to them, and they will license it back to us as per what they think we need. So strangely, there were people and important people in Auroville who said, we should join because then we'll become global. This business of, we are not good enough and he'll make us better is a kind of inferiority complex. So I actually put my foot down and said, I will take the responsibility, whatever happens. We're going to call it integral psychology, because some of Sri Aurobindo's disciples had written a book called Integral Psychology. So what is all this that he claims it as his? So anyway, we had many battles like that. Then I took the matter to there was an annual conference in USA called OM, All USA Meeting. All USA Meeting, OM, used to be happening in those days, in the 90s and early 2000s. And so I took it to the OM meeting, and I said, I'll fund it. They applied for a grant. We were giving a lot of grants to Auroville Village Development and Pondicherry Ashram and so on. We were giving grants there. And I was trying to look for scholars, to give grants to scholars who could help us out in this kind of research to create a kind of ecosystem of our own. And in funding these OM meetings, I had one requirement. I said, you are talking about, all kinds of wonderful teachings of Sri Aurobindo, but let's not do it in isolation as if this issue does not exist. I want at least one panel. If you're having a 2-day, 3-day conference, I'm happy to fund it, but I want at least one panel, which will be on the comparative study of Sri Aurobindo and Ken Wilber, and so that the Aurobindonians are not sleeping, so that the Aurobindonians are at least aware of it. And there was a pushback. I've written this whole thing in the first 100 pages of the book, is the story of my encounters with the Aurobindonians. The encounters with Wilber, bad enough and strong enough, but now I have to also fight the Aurobindonians who don't want to have anything to do with it. So the OM meeting people reluctantly agreed that, okay, we'll let one panel happen, where we will put up with your controversy. I mean, anything provocative is a controversy. So that happened. And that is when I went to Pondicherry, one of the most defining moments in my life was I met an elder person called K.D. Setna. K.D. Setna he died at the age of 106 later. And when I met him, he was in his 90s. He was in a nursing home in a wheelchair. And I was introduced to him. He was an assistant of Sri Aurobindo. He used to type Sri Aurobindo's handwritten things, which turned into books. And he would give Sri Aurobindo feedback, and they would, I think Sri Aurobindo named him Amal Kiran, something like Amal Kiran was his nickname. And so Sri Aurobindo was really fond of him. I met him, and he loved my project. He said, this is important to do. And this is the kind of thing he said he himself was interested in doing. And I should continue that. So he gave me a lot of his books that he had written of similar things. And it inspired me quite a lot. So that was one person. The second person who encouraged this was Kirit Joshi. Kirit Joshi was also an Aurobindonian. And he used to be the Gujarat education minister. And Indira Gandhi brought him to the center as education minister in some kind of education capacity. And he became quite close to us, and he liked this and supported me. And he felt that I was the right person to do it. So he was gung-ho about it. And then the third person was the ex-president of Singapore, Devan Nair. I met him in one of these OM meetings, and he saw the email exchanges and correspondences where I'm asking the Aurobindonians to get involved and help me out, and they're giving every reason that we are so much into higher consciousness. We don't worry about these things. We are so much so lofty that these are all mundane things. We don't get into politics, all kind of reasons they gave. So he nicknamed them. He coined a term called navel-gazing Aurobindonians. So he wrote all this. He said these are all navel-gazing Aurobindonians. So section 1 of this book is called The Navel-Gazing Aurobindonians, and it's an anecdote of all the things that I went through. And the book is dedicated to these three men, K.D. Setna, Kirit Joshi, and Devan Nair, without whom I would not be doing this 25 years of work on this. Now let's go to Wilber himself. Wilber is a typical sort of a U-turner. He started as a student. He was a psychologist, trained psychologist, transpersonal psychology. In the beginning, he was interested in understanding Madhyamika Buddhism, Kashmir Shaivism, Sri Aurobindo. These are some of the main things. And he started becoming a curator, translator and curator. You see, a curator in a museum does not have to be a scholar who understands how everything relates, but a collector of these works, collector of this theory, this idea, this ritual, this symbolism, whatever he could come across, he would curate it. And then after he got deep into it, he started mapping it onto Western thinkers. If you read his books, the attribution of all this knowledge given to various Western thinkers, you could list well over 50 thinkers. I mean, there's all sorts of Western thinkers. Many of them I'd heard of and knew about. Some of them I did not know about. I had to go and dig up knowledge about them, information about them. And so the synthetic unity is what he created. Now, it is not based on his own experience. He never claimed that he had had these higher experiences the way Sri Aurobindo did. He never claimed to have done something equivalent to integral yoga to lead to those higher experiences. He never claimed even that. He's just a scholar, an intellectual, copy-pasting from here, there, and saying this resembles that and this maps as that, and so kind of doing a synthesis to put it all together that way. Now, if you have not experienced it yourself, and you are claiming to have come up with this great philosophy, it's not darshan. Darshan and philosophy are different because philosophy is intellectual, conceptual. You don't need to have experienced any of it, but you've read it somewhere, you read this somewhere, and you cut, paste, and copy, and you can become a philosopher. In fact, analytical philosophy does not even believe that there is a higher state of consciousness. It's just analytically derived. Whereas darshan is different. He never claimed to have that darshan experience for himself. And I use the term integral unity differentiated from synthetic unity, because integral unity is a unity that you get only from darshan, only from experience. A single mind experiencing all kinds of things will have an experience-based description of what this is all about. And there will be links, there will be correlations, there will be one thing leads to another. It's like an organic unity, the way a plant, for example, or any organic entity, from the roots to the branches, to the leaves, to the flowers, to the fruits, it's all the same DNA, it's all unified. And like any organic entity is an integral unity. But a synthetic unity is a copy-paste. You can buy something from here, buy something from there, stick it together, make a table, make a chair. I mean, all these things are synthetic unities. They're not organically unified because there are different parts that have been assembled together. So the difference between these two kinds of unities is very important. And when you take a civilization's integral unity apart and map it to some other people and then reassemble it into a synthetic unity, you have done violence. That's the point. It's not that they're not good people. It's not that they don't have a right to do this, but I have a right to sort of point out that the repackaged version is not an integral unity. That's all I'm trying to actually say. So, and Wilber has been called the Einstein of consciousness. That's the name his people have given him, Einstein of consciousness. So, the purpose of this project is to do a comparative study with rigor, identify the appropriations, identify the distortions, and find. What troubles me is that Sri Aurobindo has been often reduced to a kind of idolatry. He's this idol that we worship and go there, and whereas his thoughts, which is what it's really about, need to be studied a lot more and made part of schools, colleges, curriculums, living and as living philosophy, not just as something you pay homage to. So, and one of the most troubling distortions is the characterization of Sri Aurobindo as world negating, otherworldly mystic. Otherworldly mystic, not practical, introverted, not about the society, whereas Sri Aurobindo was totally different than that. He would reprimand the Advaita Vedantins who were escapists. He wanted this worldly engagement, and he wanted the evolution happening in the world, in the collective consciousness. So this is an unfair characterization to call him otherworldly. Now, Wilber came up with a nomenclature that is so arrogant. It says Wilber 1 is a state of understanding which was his early state, that is called Wilber 1. And then when he learned more, that state of knowledge is called Wilber 2. And then when he learned even more, that state of knowledge is called Wilber 3. So he's named the different levels of knowledge after himself. And so I'll tell you a little bit about each of the Wilber 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then ask my co-authors to go deeper and elaborate. In Wilber 1, the idea of perennialism is used as a sort of a stomach in which to digest Sri Aurobindo. Perennialism is something that the Westerners developed, where they said all mystics are the same and all religions are the same. And basically, they tend to be otherworldly. The otherworldliness is emphasized. And so once you've characterized Sri Aurobindo as a perennialist, then there's nothing distinct left. I mean, it's a recipe to just get rid of anything distinct about him. And also to locate him in a corner as, sort of worrying about the individual mystic, introverted person with very little message in the social political domain. Then, and this, by the way, I don't want to digress too much. This is also my big disagreement with Shashi Tharoor, because Shashi Tharoor, in his book Why I'm a Hindu, criticizes what he calls social political Hinduism as not authentic. Which means, so he says the real Hindu is the one who does rituals, sit at home, mind his own business, do his meditation, and he's not involved in the external world. But that's total nonsense, because if that were the case, then why would Sri Krishna in the Mahabharata ask Arjuna to take action? And why would Sri Krishna be born and take action? And why would Sri Ramchandra be born to take action in society? The whole Itihas would be useless if he were right. So, this business of limiting us into a corner, saying, "Aap to bahut great hain, aap wahan baithe kone pe aap puja karte jaएं." Or, and our people are so naive, they take it as a compliment, say, हाँ वो गोरा आदमी आया था, वो कह रहा था हमको बहुत बड़ा अच्छा उसने बना दिया, तो हम पूजा ही करेंगे, उसको करने तो he'll run the country, and he'll glorify us as lofty people. This is a kind of nonsense, and this is what happens when you accept perennialism. This next Wilber 2, I'll go through these soon because I want to give others a chance also, but I'll just go through fast. In Wilber 2, he takes the idea, very quintessential Sri Aurobindo idea of involution before evolution, which is one of the most amazing principles that we have. And Sri Aurobindo got it from Swami Vivekananda. And when you go to Swami Vivekananda's works, he got it from the Vedic heritage. So this idea is a very ancient idea that we have. And Ken Wilber claimed that this is his own original idea. And then Sri Aurobindo's idea, assent and integrate. Assent and integrate, he called it transcend and include. He changed the name nomenclature. Assent and integrate means that when you go to a higher level, then you don't forget the lower level. Like if I were to become a big rishi, I don't forget to tie my shoelaces. I don't forget how to drive a car. I still file my tax return. I mean, it's like the mundane things. I have transcended the limits, the boundaries. I'm no longer limited by the worldly things, but I'm still including them. It's not like I have not lost my faculties. So assent and integrate. The difference is that Wilber ignores that assent has to do with descent of consciousness. Descent of consciousness, higher consciousness, is what enables the ascent. So the idea that the descent and ascent are linked is ignored by Wilber. In doing so, there is the role of the divine is missing in his. This is a very big thing, that there is this evolution, and he calls it spiritual, but the role of the divine, because I suppose he wanted to be scientific and he didn't want divine because that sounds like God, and then people will say, oh no, you're one of those religious people, so he wanted to turn it into very science. And so the divinity is underplayed in his system. And then there is something else called pre-trans fallacy. which is another term that he coins for something that actually Sri Aurobindo is very clear about. But he accuses Sri Aurobindo of being limited, he criticizes his system for falling into the pre-trans fallacy. Actually, he discovers that pre-trans fallacy is something that the Europeans were suffering from, and because the Europeans were suffering from, he claimed that Sri Aurobindo and the Indian thought also suffers from it. In a nutshell, what pre-trans fallacy says is this: that the child is in a very innocent state, and then becomes the adult. And the adult is no longer like the child, but adult is very rational, logical, and very egotistical, and has all kind of things he's involved in. And then when you advance beyond that to a higher state of consciousness, you are innocent as a child. Mystics are innocent as a child, but people mistakenly think that this rishi is no longer able to have the faculties of an adult. He's fallen back as a child. He's regressed. It's called. They think that he has regressed. Actually, he's unfit to be a mature person. He should not be given voting rights because he doesn't understand these things. So that is the pre-trans fallacy. Now that pre-trans fallacy is within the Western tradition. He found it that this is a problem, but he said that the Indians also have it, which is unfair. And then he came up with a solution using Sri Aurobindo and called it his own. So Sri Aurobindo is the problem and he's the solution, which is the other way around. So then he's come up with all the vocabulary of Sri Aurobindo, like inconscience, subconscious, superconscious, as different states of consciousness, and he comes up with his own jargon to kind of hide it. Then in Wilber 3, I won't go through, but he talks about the lines and stages of development and the psychic being he discovers as an important thing and calls it his own. And then just to complete this and turn over to other people, he appropriates the idea of immanence and transcendence. This is so important. When you have Sagun Brahman is transcendent and immanent. In the Abrahamic religions, God is transcendent but not immanent. God isn't here, there like that. God has created all this, but he's not part of matter. He's not in the Ganga. He's not in the mountains, and that is called idolatry. That is why there is an injunction against idolatry, because when we say immanence, which means we find the presence of the Devatas everywhere, and we can do Murti Puja because of that. That is all banned as idolatry because immanence is a problem for them. But then modern thinkers like Charles Hartshorne at University of Chicago, they appropriated a lot of this immanence, transcendence idea from India. Charles Hartshorne, he did a PhD. There was a PhD dissertation under him of an Indian whose PhD was called The Philosophy of Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami is a very quintessential person in this philosophy from the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And so the Hartshorne got these ideas because he directed many of these PhDs. This is like 100 years ago. And he became one of the pioneers in what he called panentheism. Panentheism is this sort of an idea. And so Wilber credits that as a Western concept because he picked it up from Westerners who also had digested it from our tradition. So this goes on. I'll conclude by saying that he says that what is really original that Sri Aurobindo didn't have, that he brings, is the idea of collective consciousness and collective rather than individual. But that is the point, is that this collective consciousness is the whole theory of Sri Aurobindo. That is his essence. And so to kind of negate that is rather unfair. Now, this is a very long story, deep, lot of scholarship. We could go on, and hopefully I'll come back and we'll do other conferences and panels where we'll do full day workshops. But I want to stop here and give an opportunity for my co-authors, both of them, Manogna and Kundan, to please elaborate further. And thank you very much for listening.
Manogna, if you could come up to the podium and some more information on the book.
Namaste. My warm regards to His Excellency Dr. Karan Singh ji, Professor Kapil Kapur ji, Dr. Shruti Poddar ji, the incredible team at INTACH, my mentors and colleagues both on and off the dais at Infinity Foundation, and the publishers team at Blue One. And I thank all of you for joining us this evening on the occasion of the launch of this book. The book which is at the heart of our event today, The Battle for Consciousness Theory, it is a work in which we authors have meticulously documented and challenged the digestion and subversion of the work, one of India's greatest sages, Sri Aurobindo. As Rajiv ji explained, the book uncovers the systematic co-opting of Sri Aurobindo's seminal ideas by the American theorist Ken Wilber, and their reformulation into Wilber's own flawed integral theory. The meticulousness includes doing a one-on-one mapping, comparing all of Wilber's work from his earliest 1977 work onto his latest, which has spanned nearly 3 decades and more. Among the innumerable contributions Bharata has brought to the global table, perhaps the most majestic are the richness of its unparalleled insights into consciousness, the nature of reality, and the psychology of man. So at a time when we had no political freedom and were under foreign subjugation, Sri Aurobindo shone bright and recast the fundamental truths of existence from the Vedic framework, and which were experienced and conceptualized by our rishis. He recast that into the modern language and framed it into his own unique integral or Purna Yoga. He built upon the work of Swami Vivekananda, introduced into the West native Indic concepts, and both of them championed the Bharatiya Drishti and the Bharatiya school of thought and paramparas in highly adversarial circumstances. They actively defended Indian traditions and the corpus from distortions and misinterpretations in their times. It is unfortunate that we let the Wilberization of Sri Aurobindo's studies happen and thus fail to live up to the examples which the two had set for us. Our book today, as Rajiv ji mentioned, is motivated by this. And it offers the most extensive and comprehensive counter so far to Wilber's appropriation put forth from a true Aurobindonian standpoint. In particular, now that Rajiv ji has touched upon the major issues in each of Wilber's phases, I thought of tackling 2 particular ones from his latest stages. So among the most foundational Indian concepts that have been mined by the West, an important one is that of the Brahman, and the nature of the Brahman being Sat Chit Ananda. The paths man can take to realizing these highest states of consciousness form the core and hearts of many branches and darshanas of Indic knowledge systems. When a Western mind, such as Wilber's, analyzes these paths from the lens of synthetic unity, the schisms which characterize the Western worldviews get mapped on to our native Indic thought. For instance, as Rajiv ji mentioned, one of the key concepts Wilber appropriates and distorts is that of immanence and transcendence. Now, the Upanishadic truth, as seen in Ishopanishad's very first verse, Isha Vastyamidam Khalu Sarvam, it declares that Isha, or the highest consciousness, pervades all manifested reality. Now, this is the first principle of immanence and provides a fundamental meaning to the reality of the phenomenal world all of us are a part of. Sri Aurobindo and before him Swami Vivekananda based their models on this concept. Sri Aurobindo's worldview bridged the gap between the immanent and the transcendent and provided meaning to the phenomenal world itself as being capable of being the plane where we spiritually ascend. Wilber, though, has appropriated this immanence and transcendence in his attempts to synthetically solve the Western schism between matter and spirit, or the worldly and otherworldly. He credits the idea to Westerners in order to position himself as the latest in their lineage while using Sri Aurobindo's ideas. Further, not only does Wilber appropriate, he goes ahead and mischaracterizes Indian thought from which he is appropriated. He boxes India as a pre-modern society focused on otherworldly ideas, uses very interesting sleight of hand to rebrand all Indian philosophy as one which is only transcendent but without immanence. So this serious and grave mischaracterization not impacts impacts Sri Aurobindo's studies, but the entire Vedic framework. The second issue I wanted to highlight relates to Wilber's framework, which is called AQAL, all quadrant, all levels. Now, this is a framework. It is a grid. You can visualize it as a grid. It comprises of 4 quadrants to understand the relationship between the individual and the collective. So what this grid does is it organizes all aspects of man, whether it is his physical, psychological, social, spiritual. All of man's activities are organized for analysis into this quadrant. Wilber, over his many phases, despite mining everything from the Indic traditions and from Swami and from Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo's thought, localizes Eastern traditions only into one upper left quadrant, which is concerned only with interior, spiritual, individual aspects of man. This is problematic, not only from the dharmic perspective, but also specifically because Sri Aurobindo has focused his yoga on the work done in the world and the social systems of the collective. So what Wilber has done and what we meticulously document through one-on-one mapping, mining his work, showing the equivalent from the Indic systems and Sri Aurobindo's work, is to subsume the entire work of Sri Aurobindo and the Vedic framework into one single quadrant, which is based on Western universalism and, of course, his own poor scholarship. We undertake a systematic critique of this model and not only show its origins in Sri Aurobindo's work, but also show how Wilber has borrowed from prior Western digesters, who in turn had mined the Upanishadic truths for their insights. Sri Aurobindo was one of the greatest rishis of Bharata, and his contribution to building a case for modern Indian civilizational state, which was based on our millennia-old cultural heritage, is invaluable. If the work of someone of his caliber can be so actively co-opted, one can only imagine how serious the situation is, where Bharatiya civilizational assets are being plundered with no consequences or pushback. We are already, unfortunately, at a stage where the repackaged theories of Sri Aurobindo have come into India and are being used over here in diverse domains. We believe that the patterns that we have unearthed in the case of Wilber and Sri Aurobindo can in fact be transposed to so many other domains as a part of the decoloniality process. And we hope through our book, this would inform our generation of scholars, practitioners, and in fact all Indians. Through today's Lokarpanam, I hope the book provokes and rekindles long overdue discussions regarding this matter. Thank you.
Professor Singh, your remarks as a co-author, please.
Thank you. Namaste, everyone present on the dais and in the hall. So as Rajivji was saying, this book is an outcome of 25 years of research. And it was in a certain time frame that I got involved with this project. And given that Rajiv ji spoke about his U-turn theory, and given that he is the creator of the U-turn theory, he would not talk about how important that theory is, but I would like to shed light on this because it sort of validates and underlines the genius of Rajiv ji in figuring out the U-turn theory. So my talk is going to be focused on his U-turn theory and how that U-turn theory actually finds correspondence in the writings of Ken Wilber. So what is stage one of the U-turn theory? Discipleship, right? As Manogna ji mentioned, in the 70s, Wilber wrote two important Wilber 1 books, No Boundary and The Spectrum of Consciousness. In this particular stage, Wilber was something which will be called as typal Wilber, in the sense that Wilber had discovered the 5 koshas, the Panch koshas. We are all familiar with the Panch koshas, I'm not going to name them, the 5 planes of consciousness. And within the 5 planes of consciousness, what he does is that he perennializes them, he generalizes them. And as he generalizes them, he begins to fit different psychological theories into the lower aspects of the spectrum. In Wilber 1 stage, Wilber is hardly familiar with the writings of Sri Aurobindo. He's familiar with his name, but he is not familiar with his work. It is in Wilber 2 stage that he discovers Sri Aurobindo. He calls this stage as evolutionary Wilber. As has been pointed out by my co-authors, this is when he discovers the idea of involution and evolution from Sri Aurobindo. I don't think Wilber was familiar with this fact that the ideas of involution and evolution were spoken about by Swami Vivekananda earlier, but it was basically built on these ideas that Sri Aurobindo had developed his theory. There's one important factoid which people may not be familiar with. Swami Vivekananda left his body in 1902. It was in 1908 and 1909 that Sri Aurobindo was incarcerated in a jail undergoing Alipur trial case. Sri Aurobindo had a couple of spiritual experiences. And one of the experiences entailed an ethereal visitation from Swami Vivekananda, where Sri Aurobindo writes that Swami Vivekananda spoke to him for 14 days continuously and gave to him the future course of his sadhana. There's another aspect which is very important to Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, which is the idea of supramentalization. Supramentalization in the future is going to turn the human being, which is a transitional human being, into something very different. Sri Aurobindo says that the term supramental is his, but all the ideas were given to him by Swami Vivekananda. So Sri Aurobindo basically comes from the lineage of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. This is something which is not really known to people. So it does not surprise us that even his ideas of involution and evolution were basically derived from Sri Aurobindo, and Sri Aurobindo has written about it in great details. Now, what is it that Wilber does? Wilber takes this quintessential idea from Sri Aurobindo and perennializes it, as it has been pointed out earlier. By that, he means that this idea was common to all mystics. And therefore, he uses this phrase according to many mystics in his Wilber II book, The Atma Project, very, very frequently. There are times when he actually takes the entire quote from Sri Aurobindo and uses this phrase according to many mystics. And as the book will show in greater detail, he has verbatim taken ideas from Sri Aurobindo without due acknowledgement even. What we have done in this book is that we have created tables. We have on one side shown the writings of Sri Aurobindo, and on the other side we have shown the writings of Ken Wilber. The correspondence is absolutely clear for everyone to see. We have laid it out. This is something which has not been pointed out, and I believe that for this reason alone, that the book needs to be read. Now, Wilber got caught in his own writings. How did he get caught in his writings? This is something which you would want to know. As has been pointed out, I'm repeating this, his works have been divided into various stages: Wilber 1, Wilber 2, Wilber 3, Wilber 4, Wilber 5, and so on and so forth. So, in Wilber 2 stage, by ransacking the ideas from Sri Aurobindo, he created a very hierarchical model. The model that you find in the Atma Project is a very hierarchical one. So once this book got published, Wilber got a lot of flack for it. People criticized him. So he came out with other books at his Wilber 3 stage: Transformation of Consciousness and Eye to Eye. Now, what he does is that he conflates his Wilber 2 with Sri Aurobindo. In Wilber 2 stage, he barely mentions Sri Aurobindo, but when he comes to Wilber 3 stage, he acknowledges Sri Aurobindo. So what I have written in this book is that he is a very cunning appropriator. He is not a simple one. So, his writings have to be read in great detail. Now, in Wilber 3 stage, that is when he starts appropriating the integral worldview of Sri Aurobindo. And that also happens gradually. In Wilber 2, he has appropriated involution and evolution and some other ideas that were spoken about, for instance, transcend and include, which are central ideas of Sri Aurobindo in the Life Divine discussed under transcendence and integration. In Wilber 3 stage, he begins this process in Eye to Eye. And when he comes to sex, ecology and spirituality, SES as it is usually called, which is an important Wilber 4 stage, he unfolds this model completely. And in this model also you have deep imprints of Sri Aurobindo. And as he progresses on his path, he gradually begins to demonize Sri Aurobindo. So what he does towards the end is that he puts Sri Aurobindo as an otherworldly mystic, not involved with this worldly affairs at all. And as has been pointed out, people who are familiar with the writings of Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo's yoga is about world transformation. It is about transforming, everything that is present of this earth. It seems that that I'm running short of time. There is a lot that is in the book. I just want to close my talk with one factoid. As we were researching this book, I also came to understand that Wilber had not read Sri Aurobindo in great detail. And this is where, the hand of divine actually came in, because both Sri Aurobindo and Ken Wilber are voluminous. Ken Wilber has derived ideas of Sri Aurobindo from two sources. One is the Essential Aurobindo by Robert McDermott, which is a compilation of his essays. And the other one is a chapter by S. Radhakrishnan from his book, A Source Book in Indian Philosophy. These two pieces of work basically support the appropriation of Ken Wilber. And there's some very interesting facts in the book. I would want each one of you to get hold of it and go through it. And as Rajiv said, we are going to have many conferences, so we will be unfolding and unpacking this topic more. Thank you very much.
We have a video message that has been sent by Dr. Alok Pandey for the occasion, and we would like to play that. He's a well-known authority on Sri Aurobindo and the mother's writings, especially on the subject of yoga and psychology, education and health. Can we play that video, please?
Namaste. It's a joy to speak about the recent book by Dr. Rajiv Malhotra, The Battleground of Consciousness. Of course, he needs no introduction. I know this from my little understanding and meetings with him, that he also has his own yoga practice, which makes him a person apart from just those who have played out ideas in the mind and they write books or they give talks. And one can see that when it comes to ideas, that there is a great degree of mastery over the mind, the ideas, how they formulate and how they are formed. And then, of course, the samrat. They are ideas which need to be reckoned by the world. So, he is not just an Indologist in the normal sense of the word, in the sense he's not just an Indologist because his roots are from India and therefore there is not a sentimental idealism attached to it. So this is where we must understand, because there is a tendency. There are people who talk about Carl Jung versus Sri Aurobindo, Ken Wilber and Sri Aurobindo. They don't realize that there is a fundamental difference between a yogi, a mystic, at whatever level he may be, and a person who is philosophizing on the armchair. But what is more dangerous is that ideas are usurped. Leave aside acknowledging or not acknowledging is a different matter. Anyone who has read both of them can really compare and say that they stand on even closely similar grounds. What really is these two approaches? Now, with regard to consciousness, we have a very interesting document of Sri Aurobindo. It's running in some 5 pages plus. Sri Aurobindo, this 75-page document is part of his essay, series of essays, short essays, which are, he has himself given the title as The Science of Consciousness. And he speaks about the science of consciousness as a science of the future. And he starts with a bang, that body, mind, they are instruments to be used by consciousness. So that in this paradigm, according to the Sanatana Dharma, the Indic paradigm, if you want to put it, consciousness is primary, it's a fundamental reality. It's a very fascinating field, and it's essentially a top-down view of creation. Again, the Gita would not use the word consciousness, but the entire Urdharva Moolam, Ashwat tree is basically science of consciousness, but looking at creation from above downwards. On the other hand, there is this other view of creation, which we see today in materialistic science, largely in the Western context, but hopefully, and I think thankfully, the West is beginning to change. It is seeing things from below upwards. So when we look at consciousness, we look at it as an offshoot of phenomena. It's almost like asking a computer to describe the man. If we follow this paradigm, that the Western paradigm that, consciousness is an epiphenomena, it has momentous consequences. Dr. Rajiv Malhotra has taken another even interesting part. So this is where the two paradigms stand. But there are those who appropriate the Indic thought. and present it, digest it, half chewed, half digested, and vomited out. Now, this is dangerous. As I said, Jung, I put in that category. I know I may offend some people who basically appropriate the Indic ideas and they present it maybe in a very presentable way of the way the Western propaganda system has packaged things. But here, when you have to compare products, strip off the package, look at it as it is. That's what we see Dr. Rajiv Malhotra doing. He's removing all that useless coverings. If you have to make a comparative study, you do it with Sri Ramakrishna, with Swami Vivekananda, maybe some other mystics, or some Western mystics like St. Augustine, some other who have been even good psychologists. That makes sense. It's okay. You may have your own views, but at least you are putting things which are together. But this tendency to pick up a mystic and a yogi and to put it in intellectual terms at the level of a thinker is actually to do grave injustice, not just to the mystic or the yogi, but our concern is the younger generation. That there are young, impressionable minds, they catch up the wave like the woke culture. They don't even realize. They don't even know where it is coming from. And it's like a wave and they pick it up. As I said, he is not a sentimental idealist who is saying, you must believe me simply because, I'm an Indian and it's an Indian work and everything Indian is great. He's not saying that. He is bringing out with solid research, evidence, and with proper study of whatever he is doing. And that's something very beautiful because it appeals to a certain kind of mindset, especially among the young. So I wish him well. This book, of course, as I have seen his books, is certainly, according to me, a must-read for all those who want to delve a little deeper into a comparative study of consciousness, especially who want to see how Sri Aurobindo's views have been taken up and presented, and who may, and I know a number of people who do that, personally I know, who not only may, who pick up those half-chewed ideas and take it to be true, and don't care to study Sri Aurobindo in the original. And so if one wants to really do a course correction, of course reading this book and books of this kind are very useful.
Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Karan Singh to give us his first, they said to call you first, no? Okay. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Kapil Kapur, who I know for many, many years, not only a great Sanskrit scholar, but you'll come here.
सबको मेरा नमस्कार. My respect to the distinguished people sitting on the dais. Reverence to Karan Singh ji, whom I have known and revered for years. To Rajiv Malhotra ji, who is a good brother and he always gives me undeserved honor. And Kundan Singh ji, whom I have known many years. So Manogna I met just now and I'm very impressed with her. And I heard her. And Shruti ji, whom also I have known for many years. Spiritual musician, if I may say. We have already seen what depth and what rigor has gone into the research by three scholars in this book, which does an important, is an important defense of India's knowledge systems, in the sense that it counters the subversion of our knowledge by particularly the American Academy and some of the members of the American Academy. It has a history
And going back to PL 480 days, when we got wheat from America and the money cost was kept in India to be spent on education. So all the universities libraries were filled with American books, Ford Foundation grants, and hundreds and hundreds of Indians, half bright Indians, were given Fulbright scholarships. And that generation has grown up, and a little later, inflected by the love of the lucre, it has now become a home. The American Academy has become a home of dollar-washed and theory-colored Indians who provide the materials to some of those American scholars, through their Sanskrit and other things. And in the process, the Indian Academy became an appendage of the American Academy. India became data, and America became theory. And from that point of view, from that standpoint, they've been operating. And I think the only very, very few years ago, this fact that the rejection of the American visa was the greatest tragedy that could strike a young Indian has stopped now. But it continued for a long time. There were some resistance groups in Indian Academy, resistance groups who resisted this, but there were very few, not many. But slowly and gradually, you suddenly have a different climate of ideas today. There is quantity, maybe not that much of quality, but that from quantity, the quality shall emerge. I must also put a perspective on this work. You see, consciousness, this word has always troubled me because what is our Indian word for it? You see, in fact, for most of the meta vocabulary of Western thought, we have no Indian words really. Multiculturalism, or Bahuvad. You see, Bahubhashavad and Bahubhasha. People might think daughter-in-law language or whatever, Bahubhashavad. We don't have terms. We have these words we have borrowed, and we don't have the terms because they are not really our problems. They are not really our problems. But then, you see, the Western mind is basically Abrahamic. You see, mechanistic, materialistic, reason-centered, analytical, reason-centered, and with a worldview of separateness of reality. Everything is separate. Sab alag-alag hai. Separateness. And the reality is terra firma. It's terra firma. You can quantify, you can measure, you can divide, you can cut, you can rearrange. You see? Now, this is a worldview which springs from the theocentricity of Abrahamic knowledge. Theocentricity, God-centered. They are the Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They are theocentric people in the sense they believe in one God, formless God, Nirakar. But, and that is the fallacy, it is not Nirgun. It is Nirakar, but not Nirgun. That's why the three systems, one God systems, they keep fighting each other. They are fighting even now, as you know, two of them. The third, I think, may have to join. So they are fighting. They are one God people. but they fight. Because Nirakar hai, Nirgun nahi hai. It's a logical fallacy. It's the fault line. The Indian knowledge culture is not theocentric. It is a jiva-centric, life-centric. Life. All living beings. You see, our philosophy, our knowledge culture deals with all living beings. And for us, because all life is, I don't like that word very much, because that reminds me of them, sacred. It is sacred. It is sacred because, as Sir was saying, immanence. You see, that God, the Abrahamic God, is outside the creation. He has created it, but he is outside. And he watches it. And he watches you. He's a constable. He challans you. You know, ये गलत किया, वो गलत किया. उसका चालान करते हैं. But creation is his handiwork. But with us, the key word, Brahman, which I don't want to go into how from the Vaisheshika right through to Vedanta, how logically the concept of Brahman as an energy principle, Brahman as an energy principle, which is immanent in the universe. So you have the Brahman, Brahma, and you have Brahmanda. There is a direct connection between this energy principle and the universe. And the universe is nothing but pulsating energy in which forms arise and forms collapse. Now, in this worldview, since Brahman is inherent, immanent, everything is sacred. And therefore, for us Hindus, killing is not a simple thing. It's not a simple thing for us. But for them, killing is in fact dharma. Killing is dharma. So that Abrahamic system, one God system, monistic, terrible, you see, philosophical monism, cartographic monism, social monism, ethnic monism, racial monism. You see, that monistic straitjacket on their heads troubled the Western mind. And after First World War, you know, they seem to have lost faith in their mechanistic, materialistic, reason-centered, you know, philosophy. And they wanted to go beyond that. But to go beyond that, they didn't have anything in their own tradition. They have found it only in the Indian tradition. So, this whole notion of consciousness studies. Now, mind it, in all this book also, sir, because these people, they write in English and they think in English, not our scholars, Wilber and others, you know, those people. Their consciousness comes to the mind and stops. But then they know, they posit supermind, overmind, but it is mind. But our word for consciousness is Chetana, Chaitanya, which comes from Chitta. And the Chit is the alamban, substratum of our knowing self, And everything, our thoughts, our feelings, our creations, they all emanate from the Chitta, in which all our experience from karmendriya to Vijnanamaya Kosha, they all filter into the Chit differently with different people, but the Chit becomes that pulsating self which feels, which thinks, which creates. We create this. Our language does not represent a pre-existing reality. it creates the reality. And in fact, we create. When Salvador Dali, the man with a beautiful mustache, he put a big white paper, loaded his gun with color, and fired a shot. And that was a painting. So he created art. Or, in a Yoga Vasishta, there are 4 princes. 2 were never born, 2 never existed. They went to a city that had no foundation, no buildings. It was by a river in which there was no water, there was no sand. The princes bathed in that river. We create this we create with our self, with our chaitanya. And in yoga philosophy, the vikalpa jnana, it comes from the creation through knowledge, language, and language stored there. So because of this, we have felt that this whole universe is not a mechanical creation. It's not a mechanistic, it's not a machine. It's not a machine. 4 things are problematic, which the West tries now to handle with this mechanism of consciousness. First of all, the creation. Who created it? Well, we believe nobody created it. It was always there. The second, that reality. Is it the appearance? One. And is it separate from each other? Second. And then is it terra firma? 3 things about reality. And these 3 are countered by our thought. All the 3 are countered by our thought. And the third point that is there is, just one moment if you give me, and I can't read because I have got my cataract done. You see? Anyways, 3 are enough. There's no need to add the 4th. The whole point of view is different. We believe that this reality, for us, Rigveda, Gauri Bimai Salilani Takshati. Language cuts forms in the ocean of reality. For us, reality is an ocean, a continuum, not separate. No separateness, no Cartesian separateness of reality. It's a continuum. And it's a continuum because we experience that through all creation, a river runs through. And that river is the river of Brahman, the energy principle. It runs through the entire creation. The entire creation is alive and sacred. Now, when the Western mind, comes to, I think they reach the limits of their thought, and then they come to this consciousness, but they are terribly mistaken in thinking, because उनके सच्चे में देखिए माइंड है, सेल्फ को भी वो डिफाइन करते हैं तो थॉट से करते हैं, थॉट से. बट देन वी से यू कैन वॉच योर थॉट्स. कहते हैं ना, आजकल मेरा दिमाग बड़ा गलत शलत सोचता है ना. सो वी वॉच आवर थॉट्स. The observer and the observed cannot be the same. So there is something beyond that, and that beyond the mind is the chitta, chetana, and that is chaitanya. All these, there is a whole different worldview, different word. I think Wilbers cannot understand, because I don't think they know Sanskrit, as you pointed out, sir. They don't read the Sanskrit text. They read interpreters. Sir, you have a wonderful expression. You call Wilber a middleman between civilizations, a middleman between 2 civilizations. So such middlemen, I think they can, at the time is coming, when I think we will return the gaze. In fact, sir, you started the whiteness studies long back. So we have to return the gaze, and this is one of the beautiful efforts, a great attempt to return the gaze. I must thank you for this. I can't say congratulate. Thank you for this, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kapur. That was quite enlightening. I now call upon Dr. Karan Singh to give us his most enlightened thoughts on Sri Aurobindo, which has been a topic of his engagement, I think, since his teens or at least early 20s when he did his PhD on Sri Aurobindo. And through my various discussions with him, I have found his deep knowledge in Indian traditions, also in the Sri Vidya traditions, in the Shakti traditions. And when we talk about immanence, involution and evolution, I was reminded of the Dasho Mahavidyas, which we have discussed often. Involution is a very, very important part of that. So as I invite him to speak and give his address, if I may ask Dr. Karan Singh, I would ask him to also talk about his experience with involution and evolution and the idea of consciousness.
Thank you, Shruti. The guest of honor, Professor Kapil Kapur, the author, my good friend, Sri Rajiv Malhotra. We've known each other for several decades. The co-authors, Manogna Shastri. It's not Manogna Shastri. तो गे लिखने का तरीका जी है ना आजकल. So everybody saying Manogna Shastri. मैंने कहा ये क्या नाम हुआ Manogna Shastri? It's Manogna Shastri. गे. Sri Kundan Singh. Shruti Nathar, we were looking forward to her beautiful invocation, which she has to do at the end. And chairman and members of INTACH were here. We have all sat through very patiently 2 hours of great speeches. So I'm going to be very brief today. I'm sorry, Shruti, I'm going to do none of the things that you say. If they want to hear me on Sri Aurobindo, they'll have to call me separately. And I'll give a full lecture. But today I'm going to be extremely brief because Rajiv has already covered in an extremely important and clear manner the basis of his book. And I must congratulate him on, he's written many books, some of which I've read, but this one in a way is his magnum opus because he has spent a quarter of a century cogitating on these words. And so Nishkarsh jo hai, the result of that all that study is this massive book. It's not an easy book to read. I was struggling through the introduction. It took me a long time to go through that. So I'm not going to say, and I frankly have not read very much of Ken Wilber. I read a few articles here and there. So I cannot comment upon the actual thing. I was just looking up, interestingly enough, Rajesh, I was looking at in Wikipedia. Kenneth Wilber is an American theorist and writer on transpersonal psychology and his own integral theory. His own integral theory. In other words, he wants to, no, it's not Sri Aurobindo's theory, it's his own theory, a 4-quadrant grid which purposes to encompass all human knowledge and experience. A full-fledged response to Wilber was overdue. And there was only one man who could do that, and that is Rajesh Malhotra. Nobody else could do that. It is an exhausting job, and he must have gone into so many details. And this is a book that it'll take years to read. It's a very dense book and a very difficult book. But anybody who's really interested in the subject, this is the book to read. And I'm sure, I think that this is a real contribution towards this area of thought. Now, just 1 or 2 brief points. First of all, this question of immanence and transcendence. The Ishavasya Upanishad, everybody quotes the first line, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yatkin jagatyam jat. That's, in a way, transcendence or immanence. And then they forget the second line, Kurvani iviha karmani jijivishe shatam samaha evam toyi nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. So it is both the first one is the Jnana Yoga and the second line is the Karma Yoga. And they're linked together. So there is no opposition between the two. My own view on yoga is that there are 4 levels. There's the Jnana Yoga, the way of the mind. There's the Bhakti Yoga, the way of the heart. There's the Karma Yoga, the way of the arms. And there's Raja Yoga, the way of the breath. And I think that all 4 yogas need to be integrated and followed. And Sri Aurobindo has done that to a great extent. Now, I'm going off on a tangent. My own interest in consciousness lies, the battle of consciousness lies not between Wilber and Sri Aurobindo, but between science and philosophy. You see, brain research is now developing very rapidly. There's now the theory of neuroplasticity. We thought we were born with fixed neurons, but not so. Now researchers showed that you can change the neurons and you can change the way they live. So where is this research going to take us? And the cutting edge of research now is consciousness and brain. What is it? Is the brain, does it secrete consciousness? Or is consciousness the first full phenomena which calls forth the brain as we evolve? I mean, these are matters that are getting a lot of very interesting things. And what I think, Rajesh, you will have to look into at one point in time is this whole question of intelligence, artificial intelligence. At what stage will these robots become conscious? Will they become conscious? And at what stage will they become conscious? I mean, now the way they are growing, in the last 1 year, year and a half, this has exploded. This whole artificial intelligence has exploded. And that does have some philosophical implications. We have to face those philosophical implications. And I think Rajesh can do them very well because he is so firmly based in the Indic tradition. But it is difficult. For example, if we can ultimately bring about consciousness, then what does that prove? Does that show that what theory is correct, what theory is not? And the other thing that is, I think, very important is that the world is in a terrible state at present. Whatever we may say, whatever religions may be involved, humanity is at the crossroads. The old is collapsing and the new is struggling to be born, and we are wedged precariously between a disappearing past and an indescribable future. We do not know where we are going. And humanity is creating more and more weapons of mass destruction, Rajesh. What sort of consciousness have we developed? We talk of the evolution of consciousness. Is this the evolution of consciousness? You build a hydrogen bomb that is a genocidal weapon. You can't use it. If you use it, you finish the world. And look at the amount, billions of dollars are being made by arms manufacturers nowadays. The longer the war lasts, the more money they'll make. And we have these terrible wars on, wars in Europe, wars in Asia, wars in Africa, wars in Latin America. What is happening to human consciousness? How does that link with the idea that we're evolving into a higher consciousness? I mean, individuals may be evolving into a higher consciousness, but humanity as a whole does not seem to me to be evolving into a higher consciousness. In fact, we are at a very dangerous juncture because the negative forces that have been let loose now could very well destroy civilization as we know it. Now, one solution, Arthur Koestler, the European philosopher, has a theory, as you know, that postulates that the human race is a race programmed for self-destruction because of a defect in the cortex, in the mechanism of the brain, whereby the thinking and the feeling elements are inadequately mixed or related. So while we know what we should do, we don't do it. तो जैसे दुशासन कहता है ना, जानामि धर्म नृत्य में प्रवृत्ति, जानामि धर्म निवृत्ति. I know what is right, but I don't want to do it. It doesn't attract me. I know what is wrong, but it attracts me. Now, what do you do if that is your consciousness? So, is it possible that both of these, and the second, that is, Sri Aurobindo is the opposite. He says man is a species programmed for evolution. So the species evolved for destruction over. And one very interesting thought that came to me, perhaps both are true, in the sense that maybe we will evolve beings that will then destroy us. James Lovelock, as you know, was the Gaia hypothesis. In his 1900th year, he wrote his last book called Novocene, in which he has written that beings will emerge from existing technologies who will treat us like we treat plants and animals. Now, James Lovelock is not just a person to be. Why did what's his name? Why did Musk and others say that artificial intelligence is the greatest challenge to human civilization? So that is now the challenge that we have to meet. And I think if anybody, any philosophy can meet it, it is the Vedantic philosophy. That has been my view. I've been writing about it to some extent, but not in any depth. So Kapil Kapur is a great expert in that. The other people should begin thinking about this. Where are we going? Are we living in an artificial world of ideas and thoughts and not dealing with what is happening to humanity? Hazaron log mar rahe hain roz. Roz mar rahe, every day people are dying. The Palestinians are being massacred. किसी को दर्द है क्या? Is anybody really shaken? Ukraine and Russia, they were supposed to be the same religion, the same language, the same culture, and they're at each other's throats. So we cannot not deal with the philosophical implications of humanity as it is at present. That's my brief point. I do not want to go into it in any detail. I would just thank and congratulate my good friend Rajiv Malhotra for his extraordinary sense of analysis. He works so hard. I visited him in his home in New York, in Princeton, yes, in Princeton, and he's been working from there for years and years and years. And these two young co-authors, I have not come across them earlier, but I wish them well also. And now you have a new challenge. The new challenge is, how does Indic philosophy deal with the present negative and asuric forces that seem to be sweeping across the globe? So thank you, friends. You've been very patient for 2 hours. I have not taken up much of your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karan Singh. I'm glad you didn't listen to me and said what you said. Thank you so much. It was very enlightening. So going forward, before we open it to the audience, we were supposed to take a...
नहीं आप चलिए I don't want to.
आप थोड़ा सा रुक जाइए.
2.5 घंटे से बैठा हूँ मैं.
आप अगर 15 मिनट रुक जाए तो हम गा देंगे उसके बाद.
गाओ फिर. पहले गाओ, अभी गाओ तो फिर मैं रुकूंगा. तुम्हारा गाना सुनूंगा. ये नहीं 15 मिनट के बाद गाओ, अभी गाओ.
फिर उसके बाद क्वेश्चंस नहीं ले सकेंगे.
वो करते रहें क्वेश्चन जो मर्जी. मुझे कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है आज, कोई जवाब है. अब इन्होंने ऑलरेडी जवाब सब दे दीजिए. क्वेश्चन की क्या जरूरत है?
This is just on special request by Dr. Karan Singh. So since we were talking about consciousness, I will sing a few verses, not all the verses, from Nirvana Shatakam, which talks about the consciousness of Satchidananda, where Adi Shankaracharya describes every plane of consciousness, every part of the being. And as he mentions every single part of the being, he says, not this, not this, not this. Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham, the ultimate consciousness. So it would be apt for our discussion today. So I will sing a couple of verses. Om मनोबुद्ध्यहङ्कार चित्तानि नाहं न च श्रोत्रजिह्वे न च घ्राणनेत्रे न च व्योमभूमिर्न तेजो न वायु चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न च प्राणसंज्ञो न वै पञ्चवायुर्न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोश न वाक्पाणिपादं न चोपस्थपायु चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थं न वेदा न यज्ञः अहं भोजनं नैव भोज्यं न भोक्ता चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभूत्वाच सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणाम् अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभूत्वाच सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणाम् न चासङ्गतं नैव मुक्तिर्न मेय चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम्. Yeah. So, to carry on, at first, before we take on questions, I'd like to take one question or ask one question to Rajiv ji, which is on consciousness itself and artificial intelligence, which Dr. Karan Singh had brought up in his address. So, Rajiv, I know you've been working on artificial intelligence since a very young age. You're a physicist as well, which people may not know. What would you like to say on the future of artificial intelligence with respect to consciousness?
So I think that's actually why this book is important. I have a previous book called Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power. I think we are available there. In that, I explain the difference between intelligence and consciousness. That's a topic of considerable confusion. When you can have one without the other. So just because robots will become more and more intelligent does not mean that they will become conscious. It's a separate issue. You can have a car that drives better than humans without being conscious. It's not conscious. Unconsciously, it's driving, replicating the intelligent behavior of a driver, but while a driver is consciously driving, it is unconsciously driving. So you can decouple the intelligence from the consciousness. Similarly, there are these programs that will do facial recognition. And they recognize face better than human beings. Recognize in darkness. If you've grown a beard, if you're wearing a cap, it will still recognize you with great fidelity, speed, very cost effective. So you don't need human beings anymore to recognize faces. So things that we consider to be intelligent behavior, like recognizing somebody, like driving a car, like anything, creatively composing songs and music such that expert musicians cannot tell whether this is a human composition or not. So in every domain, the AI is able to produce things that replicate and even exceed human consciousness, human intelligence, without being conscious. So these are examples of intelligence not requiring consciousness. The reverse is also true. I know a lot of fully conscious people that I don't think are very intelligent. So you can be very conscious and totally dumb. Now, this means that first we have to decouple the two, because that semantic difference has not been properly clarified. People are mixing it up. So singularity is the term used by the AI people to describe a point in the future, and they keep debating when it will happen. Some people say 2030, some people say sooner, some people say later. But that singularity is defined as the point in time when machines will be superseding human intelligence. It has therefore been assumed that they'll be conscious. But consciousness means self-aware. The machine would have to be able to feel that, hey, I am conscious, I am here. And I don't think that is likely. Because if you look at if you bring it back to Sri Aurobindo's teachings, consciousness evolved because there was involution. There was involution, which then led from dead matter, it led to evolution. So we do not have an involution, a descent into silicon. We do not have that involution into silicon, which would lead the silicon to evolve into a conscious entity. And no matter how many algorithms and how smart the algorithms are, how much machine learning you do, that is not the same thing as involution. So this is my position on consciousness versus intelligence.
Thank you, Rajiv.
I
Food for thought.
can I just ask?
Yes, sir.
Hari's Vakyapad here. There are two separate terms. Sangya is for intelligence and Chetana is for consciousness.
Raji,
So,
I just have
with that, yes, we take questions now. Yes.
I just have some observations and
We'll only be able to take questions.
please,
No,
all right, I'll put it as a
observations.
question.
Only a question, please. Only a question, please.
See, all right. Don't you, Rajiv, think that the entire piece of work that you've done is not just a mere academic exercise? It can affect us, everybody personally, because I'm reminded of the Greco Roman civilization that the intellectual class started believing that there was nothing to fight for,
So
And-
we'll stop that question there and ask Rajiv to answer.
and it collapsed.
So that's more of a comment. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Next question, please. At the back, in the green.
Sir, how do we ensure that this bastion of battle is passed on to younger generations?
So, first of all, you have to internalize it yourself. We like to say how to help others, but you have to first, you as an individual, have to take it, read, understand. That is your yajna. It has to be your swadharma to do that. Once more people start doing it, then we will come up with the next stage, how to pass it on to the next generation. Homendra ji, you agree, na? Okay, we have to internalize it ourselves first.
And
Yeah, I
next
have a
question.
question.
Yeah, one more question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sir, it's not a question actually. It's a question to Sir Rajiv sir because I respect him too much. I call him the modern day Maharshi, and I've been using this term for him for the past 10 years. Now it's synonym, at least in our circles. एक शब्द सुनने के लिए कान तरस गए. इंडिक सिविलाइजेशन, इंडोलॉजिस्ट, थोड़ा सा हिंदू सभ्यता पर भी बात कर लें कि अगर हम अपने आप को हिंदू कह लें तो बहुत से लोग जो आपको पढ़ते हैं, मुझ जैसे लोग, मैं तो कम से कम अपने आप को कट्टर हिंदू मानता हूं साहब. तो अगर हम इंडिक सिविलाइजेशन, इंडिक नैरेटिव, ठीक है, जहां आप रहते हैं शायद वहां पर ये एक व्यवस्था हो कि आप पर अटैक्स कम हो, इसलिए आप इंडिक वर्ड यूज करते हैं, लेकिन भारत में अपने लोगों के बीच में एक आध बार हिंदू शब्द सुनने को मिल जाता तो शायद कान में मिश्री का सा लगता.
So, my view is, I actually started in the 90s. We were the first to start using the term Indic. We were in the US way back. And then I discarded it. I told people, do not use this word. We do not, in our Infinity Foundation, we have not used the word for 30 years. We use the word Dharma civilization. We use the word Dharma civilization. We also use the word Hindu civilization, and we also use the word Vedic civilization. In my work, I use these almost like interchangeably. Dharma, Vedic, Hindu, absolutely no problem.
Shruti,
Thank
we
you
have
very
to
much.
close this evening. Unfortunately, all
Yes.
good things need to come to an end. And on behalf of INTACH, I want to extend a big thank you to Professor Kapil Kapurji for gracing the event and for his wonderful insights. Rajiv ji, you, Manogna, I've got your name right now. Kundan ji, aap log, you are heritage warriors. In INTACH, that is the term we use, heritage warriors, and more power to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your support, and thank you for patiently staying on 2.5 hours, and you all are still here. Thank you very much, and good night.